Three Body Problem is a new series on Netflix and is created by David Benioff, D.B. Weiss, and Alexander Wu. If two of those names sound familiar to you, it's also because they did Game of Thrones some years ago, and this is their first big project since then. Before I get into it though, this is going to be a spoiler-filled review of sorts because I can't talk about Three Body Problem without addressing a few things. So if you're still watching Three Body Problem or you want to, take a minute to read the books as well, come back later and watch this video. Based on the IMDb synopsis of this show itself, a fateful decision that takes place in China in the 1960s reverberates in the present, where a group of scientists partner with a detective to confront an existential planetary threat. The reason I read the IMDb synopsis off to you is because I couldn't figure out a better way to give you a blurb. The fact of the matter is that there's a lot more going on in Three Body Problem. It's kind of hard to quantify it into one thing, but what it essentially comes down to is that the particular scientists in question over here discover a virtual reality video game of sorts. They're given these headsets, some of them, with no real reason as to how it, what they're supposed to do with it, but eventually moving up in the levels, you're understanding more and more about the situations that are being presented and how each of them seems to be this inevitable event where things go horribly wrong. But essentially, you're supposed to find the purpose in those events. The idea of how the universe essentially works, the world essentially works, and trying to find your way around that. And in that sense, Three Body Problem asks a lot of really big questions when it comes to what humanity is, or where exactly it's going, and what exactly is the purpose of every single person who is involved in this particular situation. And I think in that sense, this is a very ambitious show. It's been deemed unfilmable by a lot of people, and once you watch the series, you can kind of understand why. Whenever you've got a source material that's as dense as Three Body Problems, of course, there's going to be a lot for a show to handle. And we'll talk more about that in the later parts of the review. But I think one of the best strengths that does come from this particular adaptation of it is the fact that it manages to hone in on a lot of that, and some of it extremely effectively. And I found myself extremely riveted by the entire story that is being told over here. When you start off, you're starting to hear about many scientists who are suddenly mysteriously dying. You have no real reason as to why, and one of the breakthrough events really comes through when Augie Salazar, played by Isa Gonzalez, starts seeing numbers in front of her. She is unable to understand what exactly these are. It seems like a countdown clock, and once she starts to live out this day where she's constantly seeing the numbers, she's eventually told, hey, you don't want that to come to zero, but also you're going to start noticing some really, really weird things. And all of this seems like a part of a big master plan. And eventually it starts leading to some weird cosmic miracles, including the universe blinking, which is one of the more shocking events to happen. It's something that eventually puts the whole world on pause, because how did that happen? How did the sky start fluctuating in the middle of the night? What the hell does that even mean? And certain events like that are reverberated throughout the show itself because they all start to act like a signal of sorts. And when you connect that to the storyline that's taking place in China, along with this one scientist who is trying to communicate with anything that's out there, they're starting to establish, interstellar contact. Eventually they do, and the decision that is made during that time in order to be like, yeah, I think you should come on over, is going to be something that has massive consequences. I told you this review is going to be going into spoilers, and it does because, again, it's impossible to talk about it without spoilers. But what you're essentially getting also with that virtual reality game is that civilization that's out there is playing out certain things for you. And you're starting to try and understand them as they're starting to understand you. And as this is happening, it's also leading to more questions about where exactly does our, development stop in terms of, is there anything that we can do to improve the human race? Or is it beyond saving? Or do we need saving from an external force? Or is that external force going to help us in any way? Is giving ourselves to the idea of something else, being the developing factor, Does that mean we're giving up entirely on ourselves? But what exactly does that mean? I mean, there are so many variables to consider, and the fact that it manages to raise all of that is incredibly impressive. Of course, there is the visual spectacle and scale that goes along with a show that is made by Game of Thrones people, and that's absolutely present here. This is a massive show. It all looks spectacular. This is a very great looking series. I mean, the production design, the special effects, everything is honestly genuinely remarkable. Visually, there's one staggering scene involving nanotechnology, which really caught me off guard, especially in terms of how they pulled that off. It's really crazy. That is a scene that is both disturbing and incredible at the same time. I don't know how else to describe that, but that was a scene. There's a couple of shots here and there where you can kind of tell like they're against a CGI background, some characters, but then that's something that I feel like tends to happen when you have a show where if you touch the ground during the video game, time moves in a way that you get to see multiple things develop, and so whenever that happens, the background stuff can get a little wonky at times. So I'm not trying to defend it by any means. I'm just saying that that's something that does tend to happen. And once again, it's something that I really did like as carry forwarding from Game of Thrones. Ramin Djawadi's score, really great over here as well. It seems like some of this I think he had composed for a fifth season of Westworld, but since that's not happening, now we have it over here. So it feels like it did find its home eventually, which I'm totally cool with that. Cast performances, everybody over here is really good. Isa Gonzalez is fantastic, as is Benedict Wong. Liam Cunningham is a lot of fun over here. But the two standouts to me, however, were Zine Singh and Rosalind Chow as the two versions of Ye Wenjie. She is the scientist in China, and she's the one who is the catalyst for everything that happens. I already mentioned she's the one who sends the signal out in response to it. But that particular action and how she eventually starts to, look at the world and all of the workings of it are very interestingly realized. And even though you can overall look at her actions in the entire series and go, this is a bit selfish, because what you've essentially decided over here is you've made a decision for all of humanity that you need these, the Santi to help us, the aliens from wherever they are. And unfortunately, the problem is that we don't know if they're actually going to help us after all. Like, how can you be so sure? And eventually, when she has a partner with Mike Wells, played by Jonathan Pryce, it seems like there is some hope with that. But when that falls through, suddenly it's like, well, maybe all of this stuff that I've believed in and this, following that I've created with people who are believing in the aliens, that may or may not be the right thing to have done. And I really liked her character's progression, and it really did reflect on certain things that I found to be incredibly fascinating. And the choices reverberate to other characters, particularly another standout performance, that being Jess Hong as Jin Cheng. Her entire character as well is, as a scientist, she's the one who's trying to figure out the three-body problem, and she's trying her level best, especially with the video game. And eventually, the connections that she's building with every character, as well as the decisions that she has to take as things become more and more severe, are very riveting and also heartbreaking at times. She sometimes will have to choose between literal life and death when it comes to people that she knows. And it involves doing stuff that is going to cause life and death, amongst people. So just the idea of that playing on her and, trying to still keep going, and the pressures of all of those decisions, once again, it's captured really well with the characters. I would say that happens with multiple characters. Happens with her as well. Happens with Augie as well. Happens with Saul as well. Joanna Depo. I think he does a really great job here too. And also, he's a character who is quite skeptical about certain things, and eventually things become more and more clear, and the situation becomes crazier as well. And I like the way they captured all of that. Really, there was no bad performance over here. I think everybody did a really, really good job. And the talent in the show across the board is on display in spades. I already mentioned the important questions the show asks, and it absolutely manages to nail all of those. That being said, being a show that is as dense as this is, and having, 8 episodes in your first season, it's 8 long episodes. Don't worry about that. It's not a rushed thing like, another final season. But it is one of those things where you can definitely tell it's a very rich source material. And as such, when it comes to adapting said source material, you can often find there's a lot going on and you're trying to cover as much ground as you can. Sometimes you're able to get a lot of things in, but it does leave a few things in the dust, and there are some things that are not developed enough. And that is something that does happen with Three Body Problem. There are certain things which are explained very quickly, and we don't really get a lot of time to understand them a bit more, especially when it comes to the science and the math behind what's going on with the Three Body Problem. There are some things that are very quickly, sort of glaze past, like, all right, here's what the basic thing is, okay, moving on to the next thing. And when you have so much happening, that can result in sometimes being a little too underdone or undercooked, if you will. And that does happen over here. And as it is, when you're watching the series, it can feel like it does almost threaten to sort of buckle under the load of everything that it wants to tackle. Does it buckle? I wouldn't say it does, but I wouldn't call it a 100% home run either. It is a very good season 1. And I'm hoping that season 2 does come out soon. They haven't renewed it at the time of me making this video, but I'm hoping that renewal is going to be soon, because I am very curious to see how the story is going to progress. The first book was covered in the first 5 episodes, and then part of the second book is in the next 3. And so obviously it ends on a big cliffhanger with a lot more to do with future episodes. And so I'm very excited to see where that story is going to go. I don't know how many seasons they're going to get with this, but if there's 3 books, I'm expecting a few more. But I'm really happy overall with Three Body Problem. I really did enjoy myself. And I'm hoping that with season 2, they're able to be able to sort of compact it all into that particular season. Maybe slightly better, but overall I was satisfied. I'm gonna give Three Body Problem season 1 a B+. One of the complex reviews that I've done. I feel like this feels like a very complex review because there's so much I wanted to talk about, and there are things that I'm definitely leaving out over here that I haven't got to cover yet. But yeah, just there you go. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very soon. Let me know what you guys think of Three Body Problem in the comments down below. Did you guys enjoy the show? Have you read the books? What are your thoughts on it? As always, if you like this, please do subscribe. Thank you very much once again, and enjoy the show.